So what should be your first programming language? The answer, as usual, it depends. And here's on what. So the first thing that is important to understand is that the recommendation always needs to be tailored to you. So there's no one size fits it all solution. It needs to be tailored to the situation in which you are in. So let's just imagine you want to switch careers, right? You want to get into the programming industry. So you will be like a self-taught developer. In that case, I would highly recommend going with the web stack first. So the web stack means HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and then maybe PHP. Because the thing is, there's such a huge demand for like the web stack itself, and you can focus on small and medium businesses. And these small and medium businesses, they don't care so much about like formal education. They only care about whether you can get the job done or not. So bigger companies, they might care more about like formal education. That's why, in my opinion, it makes more sense to start out like with the web stack. And if you started with JavaScript, it should be also pretty easy to get up and running. So in case you want to get a job as fast as possible or you want to switch careers, I would definitely recommend JavaScript. Yeah, let's just imagine another situation. So let's just imagine you want to build out that app you've been thinking about for so long. And in that case, just pick whatever technology is appropriate for whatever you want to build. So if it's like a web application, I would probably go with HTML, CSS, JavaScript. So if you have a concrete project in mind, just look at the mainstream technology that is in general used for the kind of tasks that you want to perform, and then just pick that mainstream technology. So that's the second case. Yeah, so let's just imagine a third scenario. Let's say you're like in high school and you just want to get into programming, to get your feet wet, to see whether this might be something for you. So in that case, I think it's very important that you have, that quick successes, or that the learning curve is not so steep, right? Because otherwise you might just, forget about it and give up. In that case, I would recommend to go with a simple and dynamically typed language. And I, in general, would recommend JavaScript or Python. JavaScript is especially good if you want to build like web application. Also, if you want to like build out apps later on, you can do that as well. So JavaScript in general is like a pretty solid choice because you can use it pretty much everywhere and it's quite simple to learn. Now, in the fourth case, you want to do something with like, data science, for example. Then the choice is also clear, right? Just pick Python. Python is simple. It's super easy to read, super easy to write, and it should be pretty easy to at least get the syntax straight. And that's also very important because bear in mind that the data science stuff, and especially the machine learning and deep learning and computer vision things, they also require you to have a decent theoretical knowledge, right? So you should understand like specific concepts in statistics to truly understand what you are actually doing. Now, these skills, they can be acquired like step by step, so as you go. But I would say if you get into data science, just pick Python. It's just easier than say R. Yeah, and if in case you want to do some embedded stuff, you will probably not get around like C and C++. Although I have to say that C and C++ are probably not the best languages like to get into programming. They have, their caveats and they are a little bit more sophisticated. So it's just easier to learn like JavaScript or Python. However, if you have a specific project in mind and you definitely want that project to be done, then of course, pick whatever you need to pick. Yeah, and another case is that maybe you're in college and you know that you later want to go for a bigger corporation. In that case, I would use technology that is in general used in the enterprise. And that is primarily Spring and Spring Boot, if you're talking about backend, right? With front end, you have like React and Vue. In general, I just prefer React, but there's like an endless discussion going back and forth, which one is better. The answer is, I don't know. Both are solid, but if you want to go for backend technology and if you want to work like in a larger enterprise, I would highly recommend Spring and Spring Boot. Now, technically, you could also go for .NET, but I would say that in general, Spring and Spring Boot and the JVM in general is just very common, because in the enterprise, the requirements that you have are like very, very different than the requirements you have for small businesses, right? In the enterprise, you have like larger amounts of data, more compliance requirements, partly extremely high security requirements, encryption on the message level, and these kind of things. And for that, you need like a very powerful backend solution with which you can pretty much do anything. And that is, I would say, pretty much Spring and Spring Boot. So in case you want to go for the enterprise and you want to work for large corporation, if you go for backend, I would recommend Spring, Spring Boot, and Java. Yeah, so the general rule is to pick the programming language according to the task that you have at hand. So if you have a concrete task, then it should be like fairly easy to pick the correct technology, because you know exactly what you want to do. And if you want to go for like a specific sector or a specific industry, or you want to work like for large corporations, as we discussed, there's like different technologies that you should pick. Now, in general, I would recommend to not go with super niche technologies. So I would not go with Rust, for example. Also because Rust is like quite complicated. Nothing wrong with Rust, like it's great and it's cool, but I don't think it's a good first programming language. Yeah, so think of programming languages like tools. So you're like the handyman and you carry around a toolbox, okay? And in that toolbox, you have specific tools like a hammer, a screwdriver, or in the case of programming languages like JavaScript, Java, Python, and whatever. Just try to stay away from these super niche technologies unless you absolutely have a need for them. Yeah, so that's pretty much my take on programming languages. What do you think? What was your first programming language? Let me know in the comments below. Also, if you have a question, you can reach out to me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @productioncoder. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you in the next video.